Okay, well, welcome everybody to this webinar on cooperative leadership. We are really, really happy to see everybody and to welcome everyone to, this is the first in our sort of new season of webinars, if you like, and around on cooperative leadership. And so I'm just going to talk through what we're going to be discussing today. And it is quite an interactive session, so we will be asking you to take part. So, hopefully you're sort of, ready to just sort of like type a few words into a Mentimeter every now and again. And we've got quite a lot to get through as well. So we will be kind of doing a kind of, a rattling through some of this, some of the subjects in the webinar. So we're going to, just talk about different leadership theories and practices, and then identify those kind of particular challenges affecting cooperative leaders, and particularly sort of new and emerging challenges that are affecting leaders. I mean, leaders in all organizations, but also looking at how those challenges can be different for people in cooperative organizations, and also thinking about perhaps some of the tools that we can use to overcome those challenges. And it's particularly useful to have people working in cooperatives and leading cooperatives and mutual organizations, because when we come to those questions, we can share our knowledge and experience with each other, because we will be sending round the slides and also the results of the Mentimeters after the session. So we will be sending those round to participants. And then we're going to be looking at a few different aspects of what makes a good cooperative leader and why. So just moving on to the next slide. So I'm Amanda Benson, and I am the Curriculum Development Manager at the Cooperative College, and I've been here for about 7 or 8 years now. And we do deliver quite a lot of leadership type courses and events at the college, and I deliver those with my colleague Stacey, who I'm going to hand over to now.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. So I'm Stacey Sol, and I'm the lead education practitioner here at Cooperative College. I haven't been here for as long as Amanda. I've been here for about 2 years. But we, as Amanda said, we do teach a lot around leadership to lots of different types of cooperatives as well. And we've got something a little bit different to show you today, which is probably an extension of what we already do here at the college. Back to you, is it, Amanda?
We're going to start off with our Mentimeter. So shortly, a little link will appear in the Zoom chat. And if you click on that link, a question should pop up, which should be about typing the 3 words which come to mind when you think of cooperative leadership. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
And I'll share mine. So I'm just going to open up the Mentimeter. So if you click on the link that has come up in chat, you will see this question. Type 3 words which come to mind when you think of cooperative leadership. Once we've finished this question, if you just leave that link open, because as we go through the presentation, we're going to refer back to the Mentimeter with a different question. Okay, so on the screen, you should be able to see that the different words popping up. The bigger the word, the more people have typed it. At the moment, they all look quite equal size. But if you can just pop your thoughts on, and we will have a look at some of these words. So when we're thinking of cooperative leadership, so purposeful has come up quite big there on the screen. So that means more than one person's probably typed it. And we've also got collaborative and fair. They are words that you associate with the word cooperation, but when it comes to leadership, they're very, very important, aren't they? And then we've also got things like inclusive and care, friendly, sustainable. Yeah. Communication. Yeah. So these are all very general words that, if we're teaching about cooperative leadership, these are very much integral to the teaching of it. And I think people who work in cooperatives will say that these are the types of values and the types of characteristics that they see quite a lot within their cooperative because of the identity. Okay, thank you for completing that, everyone.
Right. Okay. And I'm sure that will carry on evolving in the background.
It will.
Yeah. Okay.
We can come back to it.
I'm just going to go back to sharing my screen. Okay, so now Stacey's going to talk us through some existing leadership theories.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. So for the purpose of this webinar, and we also teach a master's level module, and we teach the topic leadership. So we've done a lot of research, and plus this has come up within our careers quite a lot, but there's a lot of theory. In fact, there's probably millions of references to different leadership theories if you go and you complete a bit of research. But what we've got on the screen here is just a timeline of different theories that we have come across, and now this is just a very small handful of those, and we just wanted to talk through some of the examples, but really demonstrate how much the theory and the thinking around leadership has developed over centuries. Okay, so I'll go through each of these. So I'm just going to talk you through some of these eras that were on the timeline. And the first era is the trait era. And what sits within this trait era is the great man theory and trait theories. So when we're thinking about the great man theory, it states that leaders are born. So it's not something that can be learned. It's that they are a leader as soon as they're born. They're not made and they're not trained, and therefore only a few individuals have these unique characteristics. And this theory, if you think back to the timeline, is like from the 1830s, so quite an historic theory. But then as a development from that great man theory, several decades later, we've got this idea of the trait theory. And this evolved from the great man theory, and it states that leaders can be born or made. So it kind of sits on the fence in between. Yes, they can be born, but they can also be trained. They can also be developed as well. And through, if we think about today's day and different training courses that leaders can go on, that might sit within that, for example. And then moving on to the next theory, which is the behavioural theory, which come, quite a few years later. And the ideas behind the behavioural theory is that it's evolved from trait theories, but it also champions that leaders are made and not born. So it's quite the opposite, really. And it states that certain behaviours that a leader has can be learned through training, through development, for example. Emphasis within this theory is based on the behaviour of the leader, and rather than focusing on the characteristics and the traits, for example, but the environment and the situations are largely ignored. So depending on what might be happening in your cooperative or organisation, within this theory, that would be ignored. It's more thinking about the behaviours that those leaders are demonstrating, but also those that can be learned as well. And then moving on to the situational theory, which again come a short time after. And within this theory, it was around the 1960s, and it was recognised that the environment and the different situations that a leader might work within, and the day-to-day practices that they experience play a part in the theory of leadership. The theory focuses on specific situations. So rather than it being about traits that someone might have or characteristics or behaviours, it also takes into account that situation as well. And then moving on to the new leadership era. So this moves away from that traditional top-down approach of leadership, and it thinks about more complex aspects. It takes into account a more complex world. And we start to think about leadership as either being something as transactional, so something that is an exchange for something else, or transformational, which is a lot more supportive, a lot more developmental, kind of reaches into that kind of coaching type of leadership. And these new leadership era theories are ones that you would probably see more in the present day. But what more can we do to kind of identify a more up-to-date leadership theory that sits within the context of cooperatives? Back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Stacey. So thinking about all of those different eras, and within each of those eras as well, you'll have like multiple different sort of individual models of leadership which come up as well, and they're often named after the person who kind of invented them, and I'm using kind of inverted commas there. So, you know, there is this enormous kind of, you know, I would imagine that in any kind of business school, there's probably like a whole wall of shelves dedicated to leadership theories. And so, you know, it's evolved over centuries. And there, you know, even within conventional business, there's never been, and I was kind of joking and saying, you know, it made me think of Lord of the Rings. You know, there's not that one ring to rule them all. There isn't that one leadership theory to end all leadership theories. And so, you know, when we think about cooperatives, you know, it's a much more complex picture, isn't it? I mean, you know, there's so many different aspects of those different models and theories that we can probably draw into cooperative leadership and think, oh, that applies to this and this applies to this. But because of the diverse nature of cooperatives, you know, the fact that, you know, there's so many different cooperative types, there's, you know, lots and lots of different governance structures, you know, we've got this complicated picture because it's, you know, that to apply, you know, an off-the-shelf leadership theory to a cooperative, you know, there's a kind of mismatch there. And also the other aspect is that, you know, there is a lack of data around cooperative leadership. You know, when we carry out these courses, or when we want to put together a program to talk about cooperative leadership, finding any sort of academic evidence or support, or even like case studies that we can kind of draw comparisons from, or that we can draw conclusions from, is really challenging. And so there's a lack of data, which then leads to a lack of case studies or kind of practical evidence that we can then use to kind of, you know, to work with other people and say, oh, you know, this is something that this person has tried in this situation, you know, in a cooperative. So it, you know, it can be quite challenging. And also, you know, and this has been complained about for a long time by many people working in cooperatives and in the cooperative education sector, you know, there is a real dearth of cooperative education generally, and there's you know, in business schools there's hardly any mention of cooperatives, and you know, so cooperative leadership doesn't really get a look in, and so, you know, this means in practice that there's very little for people to draw from. And also it means that because of that focus on conventional business education, it means that when cooperatives, and I think this probably affects quite large cooperatives as well, you know, when they're drawing those, you know, team leaders and staff into those cooperatives to work at an executive level, they've often got a pool of people who've been educated in a very sort of conventional way around business. And so, you know, then it sort of brings out these conflicts then between that kind of conventional approach that is people's backgrounds, and then those people having to kind of adapt to working in a cooperative, which is obviously a lot more complex in the way that it operates, with, you know, kind of like membership and democracy and, you know, all of those other different factors and the values and principles that come into play there. And also we have to think about those different categories of who is running and who is owning the business. Because sometimes, obviously, you know, if we think about worker cooperatives and we think about members, managers, directors, you know, in some instances, these are actually all the same people as well. So, you know, you've got that added complexity. But wherever cooperative leadership is coming into play, you know, it should be inclusive, it should be accountable, and there should be democratic processes involved. So, you know, we do know that this isn't always the case, you know, that there's probably like a kind of, you know, we could probably draw like a spectrum where we can plot different cooperative types or different cooperatives according to how, you know, how open their democratic processes are, etc. But, you know, there's also a range of other factors that are affecting cooperative organisations, as we will see later on in the webinar. But for now, after all that talking, we've got another little exercise from the Mentimeter. So the next question that's going to come up is, what are the issues facing leaders in cooperatives today? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Stacey.
Thanks, Amanda. So hopefully you've still got the link open from the last question. If you haven't, please don't worry. And I know that a couple of people might have missed the first question as well. So I'm going to pop the link in the chat again. And it will come up with question 1, which was the word cloud. So if you haven't already done it, you will have to complete that question. But I'm going to move over to question 2. Find my arrow. There we go. So question 2 should now be open. And it's, what are the issues facing leaders in cooperatives today? So if you could just complete question 2, I'll give you a minute just to get some answers in there, and then we'll do a bit of a summary. Okay. So thank you for adding your answers on. If you're still typing, just carry on, it's fine. So yes, we've got some reference there to the market being very capitalist. It absolutely is, isn't it? There's, you know, a lot of organisations who are very corporate, very driven by the finances, which, you know, sometimes they have to be. Balance business sustainability with other cooperative and community aims or purpose. Yeah, that's a really, really good point about the community side as well. Cooperative model being suffocated by capitalist monopoly models, it makes it hard to introduce co-ops. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. Competition and ethics, totally. So some members are very engaged. How do leaders ensure they are taking into account all views? That's a really, really important point, isn't it? And I think something comes up a bit later in the session about how do we ensure members understand fully as well what their role is, or what they can contribute, or how cooperation can be of benefit to them as well. Lack of funding, lack of training on alternative models of leadership. Something that has come up right at the beginning is not enough young people seeing this as a path forward. And it comes up a lot in the training that we do here at the college. And we also have our youth programs as an educational offer too at the college. But you know, you ask young people about cooperatives and they just automatically assume it's a shop. They don't know really about, you know, the identity, the culture of it, the long history of cooperation. And there's that fear, isn't there, of things getting lost as, you know, time goes on, and that history not being as present anymore. So how do we get that out more to the younger generation in order to support them to become young leaders in cooperation as well? So there's some great answers on here. Lack of turnover and opportunities, lack of understanding about cooperatives in the wider public, absolutely. So no understanding of the competitive advantage. In larger co-ops, members have very low participation rates, but sometimes exec teams or also don't want more member engagement. So it's trying to find that bit in the center, isn't it, where everybody is happy. So some great answers on that, and everything that you add onto the Mentimeter will be shared after the session as well. A bit like a goodie bag, you get to look back on it. But please keep that Mentimeter open because we will be coming back to it shortly. Back over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Stacey. I do think it is interesting thinking about challenges, and obviously because of the nature of cooperatives being so varied, you know, the challenges for one cooperative will be very different to the challenges for another. But I think that sort of focus on bringing more young people seems to be one of the most universal issues facing all cooperatives. So I'm just going to go back to sharing my my screen again. So we've just done the Mentimeter. So thinking around, you know, sort of cooperatives, you know, more broadly in the 21st century, and the kind of different things that are having to be balanced by cooperative leaders. And that the fact that, you know, we are living in quite challenging times, you know, I think we can all agree there that, you know, the world is feels like quite a difficult place at the moment. And I think, you know, that kind of some of the factors that are affecting cooperatives as well as other businesses as well. But, you know, these will affect inevitably cooperatives in a different way. So, you know, we're in a post-COVID world where we've got a lot more people who are remote working. And I think there's a lot more sort of expectation that people are given those kind of flexible working options and those remote working options. But also it means that, you know, there's people's whole sort of outlook on life has been changed, I think, since COVID and lockdowns and the sort of fallout from that. And so, you know, there will be differing expectations now from staff, from customers, from members. So, you know, that there's all of those different things to be balanced as well. You know, and we're living in a very kind of divisive and sort of challenging world environment at the moment. So, you know, wars and global unrest and mass migration, which obviously affects co-ops in a different way as well, because, you know, depending on the type of co-op, it will be the sort of greater or lesser degree affected by these sorts of issues. But everyone has been touched by, you know, the hikes in costs in terms of power and sort of running a business. But also, you know, disruptions is particularly in the sort of consumer end of things. But, you know, if this can affect any business as well, is like disruptions to supply lines and all of those kind of elevated costs for running a business. And then also, you know, we have climate change that we have to think about. So again, you know, those disrupted supply lines, you know, we're hearing now, aren't we, about the fact that last year's olive harvest failed. And so, you know, olive oil prices have gone, you know, skyrocketed. And that's just one example. So, you know, these are the kind of things that come up in the headlines. But, you know, that's affecting everything, you know, and it's going to be probably getting worse, isn't it, as we move through the 21st century. And then we also have to think about those changing expectations again. So similar to the sort of COVID expectations, these will be expectations around, you know, businesses making decisions in line with thinking about climate change. And so, you know, that's going to affect all of those different stakeholders as well in those cooperatives. And then, you know, really importantly, we can't forget about AI and technological innovations and the way that is impacting businesses and changes to working practices, you know, and also balancing the cost base. So, you know, for small cooperatives, you know, kind of having to kind of, you know, modernize and keep up with technological change and the pace of change, you know, those are big overheads for organizations as well. So, you know, there's a lot of factors coming into play. And then, you know, one of the kind of important aspects as well is thinking about cooperative isomorphism. So thinking about how there's so many different competing factors which are influencing the ways that cooperative operates. So, you know, and these kind of forces will be coming from both the internal environment and the external environment, which then causes co-ops to kind of shapeshift. So, you know, we mentioned in the Mentimeter already how, you know, cooperatives are working in a market, you know, in a capitalist market. And so you know, do cooperatives have to behave more like a capitalist organisation? But then that takes them away from their kind of core purpose and core kind of cooperative model, and being reliant on those values and principles. So you know, there is that kind of shape shifting that's going on, but also it's causing an element of what I've sort of called cooperative drift. You know, are some cooperatives like drifting away? I mean, you know, I was reading recently about, you know, cooperatives which have a stake in another business. So effectively cooperatives that own another business that isn't a cooperative. So then you've got that conflict between the members of the cooperative and the people that work in that cooperative getting different rights and privileges to the people that work in the subsidiary that cooperative owns. And how cooperative is that? You know, so we have to kind of, you know, and these are the sorts of questions that as a movement we have to be asking. And you know, what does that mean in terms of leadership when we have those conflicts and when we have those different kind of factors that we have to think about? So just some kind of interesting ideas to think about there. So which leads us nicely on to question 3. So thinking about sort of your experience of working in cooperatives or in other organizations where kind of collaborative and democratic leadership is in play, you know, what are the kinds of tools, and we mean this in a really general sense, so you know, practical tools or models, but also kind of, you know, ways of working and working practices that you know you can use as cooperative leaders to overcome these factors. So I'm going to hand back over to Stacey now.
Okay, so we're going to go on to question 3. So if you don't have your Mentimeter open still, just click on the link that I popped in chat before, but you should now see question 3 open. So like Amanda said, what are the tools that leaders can use to overcome the factors that she has just discussed? So I will give you a minute to just pop your answers on there. Okay. The flexibility, consultation, absolutely, involving everyone in the decision making. Yeah, so making sure you're transparent with people, but also as a cooperative, we should be doing things cooperatively, but when we need to make a decision about something, what do others have to offer as part of that decision making process as well? Engaging stakeholders, okay, staying educated, regular training for staff, sharing the co-op vision. So when you've got all these factors outside of the organisation on quite a big scale, it is all about how we can use our leaders and what tools do they need to be able to cope or adapt to those changes that are happening. Understanding the strengths of others, okay, and when we can do that, we can bring those skills and characteristics and behaviours into the organisation. Listening and acting on feedback, engaging behind the cooperative movement, okay. The cooperative values should underpin everything. Yes, so having those as, you know, at the heart of everything you do, our then must, as individuals and as a collective, must we act in order to overcome those problems, those issues, and be able to cope with change as well. Engaging with other co-ops who might have advice, absolutely. Cooperation among cooperatives there. Boldness and willing to take risks. So lots of good answers on here. Innovation, super important, isn't it? Especially with advancements in technology, like Amanda mentioned before. Having your meetings, the AGMs, co-op to co-op, supervision, all different tools to overcome the issues that we might face as cooperatives. And I suppose it's up to the people in the leadership positions to kind of drive that collectiveness, isn't it? And that community of being able to overcome the sort of factors that are being faced in the world. And things are moving very, very fast as well, aren't they? That's great. And like I said before, we will share all these answers with you. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Like ping pong.
Yeah. Well, this is an example of cooperative working. So I'm just going to move back to sharing my screen again. So we've just done question 3. So bringing us back then to thinking about what does cooperative leadership mean in practice. Now, this is a piece of work that we carried out at the college, but it was very much kind of the starting point for it was some work that was carried out by the University of Saskatchewan. I always find that difficult to say. So the Centre for the Study of Cooperatives there. And they carried out a piece of work in 2014 to 2015 that was called the Cooperative Innovation Project. And they talked to a whole range of different people from cooperatives around cooperative leadership. And once it then they've kind of defined a whole series of kind of characteristics of you know, and they asked the question, like, what are the characteristics of a successful cooperative leader? And a few years ago at the college, we carried out a research project, an action research project in the borough of Rochdale, which obviously is the home of the modern cooperative movement. And we were working with the Cooperative Council and various other organisations in Rochdale to develop an approach and a cooperative approach to kind of delivery of arts projects across the whole borough. And so we worked with a whole team of different stakeholders in the borough. And we, as part of that, we carried out some desk research into cooperative leadership, but also, you know, we did various different workshops with the group of stakeholders. And so these were the characteristics that we came up with, which should be the kind of, you know, at the core of you know, cooperative leadership in practice. So, you know, things like that commitment to community, and you know, most cooperatives, however large they get, you know, they start with that kind of that community of need, around a need. And you know, and it's about, you know, constantly being aware of that, and also, you know, concern for community is one of the cooperative principles as well. So, you know, it's you know, deeply embedded in the very sort of nature of cooperatives. And that commitment to shared leadership. So it's not about the great man or the person who has the right traits. You know, it's very much about sharing that leadership. And those more modern leadership theories are often about the kind of leader and follower relationship. And that doesn't kind of mean leading with someone following. It's about building a relationship between different people, giving people, you know, that kind of agency and that responsibility for leading in their own areas of work. And that kind of idea of leadership from the middle is something that's now being put into action in a project in Rochdale after this research. And so it's a kind of ongoing, we're doing an ongoing evaluation of how that's working in practice, because obviously, you know, it's okay to have these ideas, but actually seeing them working in practice, and that will help us build a body of evidence that hopefully then we can share and learn from. And then also that commitment to member and stakeholder empowerment and engagement. And that obviously is covered by democratic practice, but also it means that, you know, you're giving people, you know, the power to kind of take responsibility for their own areas. And you want people to be engaged. You want people to feel involved and part of this whole process. A commitment to learning. I mean, obviously, you know, Principle 5, it's one of the cooperative principles, but it's also got to be that commitment to kind of like learning and growing as individuals, but also as an organization. And then that, you know, moving on to the spirit of social good and innovation. So, you know, the whole kind of you know, original idea of you know, the cooperative principles is that sense of social responsibility, that idea that cooperatives are doing business in a different way to other types of business. And I mean, nowadays we have, you know, the social and solidarity economy. We have lots of different organizations who are set up to be involved in social good, and also many conventional businesses and corporations also have kind of corporate social responsibility work that they do. So the environment around cooperatives being set up purely for social good and being that kind of different type of organization, you know, the picture is a lot more mixed nowadays, but cooperatives have to kind of, you know, really focus on that as being an underlying factor in the way that they work. And then that commitment to a clear shared vision. So having a real sort of clarity and bringing others along with you, but making it really clear so that people know what they're committing to as well. And that commitment to humility. So not having to always be right, not always having to feel like, you know, you're in control and you're in charge, you know, delegating power to other people, you know, accepting other people's expertise, you know, that's, you know, what that would cover. And that commitment to political balance. I mean, obviously, you know, when cooperatives were originally set up, it was very much around, you know, not having any kind of, you know, sort of potential for divisions around religion or politics. So they're very much kind of keeping that sort of that equilibrium there. And then also, you know, the role of culture. So thinking about how does culture play out and creating, you know, a kind of a positive and sort of driven culture within those organizations. And also measuring growth and success differently. So it's not, you know, we know this about cooperatives. It's not just about profit. It's not just about numbers, you know, and they're not driven by the same, you know, drivers, you know, as like financial drivers, as like a shareholder organization, for example. And obviously, again, this will sit along a spectrum because, you know, in terms of the way that cooperatives are set up, some are much more community-based and driven very much by, you know, those non-sort of financial motivations. Whereas, you know, further you go along the spectrum towards the more sort of corporate-focused cooperatives, then, you know, then obviously those drivers will be different. However, there should, across the whole board, be a commitment to thinking about growth differently than just around profit. And what does success look like? We have to think about what does success look like in a cooperative as opposed to a corporation. And then also, I like this last one, you know, that commitment to being yourself. So, you know, being authentic and being yourself, like bringing your whole self into your leadership style, so that, you know, we're all human and we very much relate to people. We don't want there to be like a kind of a barrier between us and the people leading us. You know, I think nowadays there's an expectation that, you know, it's much more of a sort of collaborative and authentic sort of relationship that you create in those spaces. So on that note, we're just going to do a quick activity on the Mentimeter where we'd like you to rank these different aspects according to where you place your you would place the emphasis on any of these characteristics. So I am going to stop sharing my screen again and pass back over to Stacey.
Thank you, Amanda. So I'll move on to question 4. Okay, so you're just ranking the different characteristics that Amanda's been speaking about in order of preference. No right or wrong answer. This is just down to your own thinking. Off you go. Quite a few to get through, isn't there?
Oh, no, it's looking good though.
I love how it comes together. Okay, so at the top, what have we got first? Commitment to shared lead. Oh, in fact, I'm not even going to say because it's going to keep changing the more people enter their answers. I'll give it another minute. Just jumping in at the gun there, aren't I? Okay, it's changing again. That commitment to community keeps going up and down, up and down. Very important one though, that, isn't it? And they're all important equally, just in different ways. But the commitment to clear shared vision is staying very strong at the top there, suggesting that a lot of people in this session agree that it's one of the most important characteristics when it comes to cooperative leadership. And then of course we've got that commitment to community as well, because you know that's a huge part of it. Without that community we wouldn't have cooperation. And their commitment to learning, very, very important. I'm not going to talk through everyone, but we can see that we've got our top 3 there. But, you know, the clear winner there is commitment to a clear shared vision. It's moving again. But we've still got those 2 at the top. Fantastic. And a commitment to shared leadership, leading from the middle. And that's very, very, you know, very now, isn't it? Rather than, as I said earlier, not having that top-down approach, but that kind of looking outwards, and everyone, I suppose, feels an equal within the organisation too. Fantastic. So I think we've just got one more question, haven't we, Amanda?
Yes, we have. So shall I
don't think we need to go back to the slides, do we?
I don't think we do.
No. Okay, well, we'll just stay on my screen, but we're going to go to the 5th and final question. Okay. So based on those characteristics that we've just been talking about, what are your non-negotiables for cooperative leadership in the 21st century? So think about what we've discussed in the session today, those characteristics, but also anything else you want to include there as well. And then we can share this with you after the webinar. Thank you. I'll give you a minute to do that. But these are the things that are really, really important to you. Okay, so far we've got as non-negotiables, so the things that people need to happen, is having that involvement, that sharing, the idea of sharing, whether that be the organisation's purpose, the values, the vision as well, listening to each other, non-negotiable as in being the values and principles, which, you know, absolutely that lack of ego. Yeah. Wait and see if anything else comes up. Ethical behaviour. That's really, really important, isn't it? A visionary approach, active involvement and clarity in the governance. Absolutely. Also love for the co-op movement. Yeah, because it's got to come from that passion, hasn't it, for that history, but also about the power of, you know, what cooperation can mean, not just for an organisation, but for people in communities as well, across the globe. maintaining the difference between co-ops and the capitalist. So that's super important as well, isn't it? Understanding that there is a difference between your other organizations that might act as, you know, private organizations, you know, the profit-making organizations. There's got to be that understanding that there is that difference when it comes to cooperatives. This, I think, is really important, having that clear communication, that curiosity sparks creativity and innovation, doesn't it, as well? Having to, being able to be adaptable. And when we think back to some of those issues that we was talking about, when it comes to COVID, when it comes to advancements in technology, being adaptable to those factors happening, you know, in that larger business environment are crucial, you know, to success and to cooperation as well. Maintaining difference, okay, which is fantastic, but they've also added on there, but that's got to be communicated. If you don't communicate, then everyone's not on the same page and we don't have that shared vision. Doing what is right for members rather than what is easy or most profitable. Yeah, so it's maintaining that authenticity of cooperation as well, isn't it? So some really great answers on that. Thank you everyone for completing those. And I think we're going to go, oh, we've just got one more. I'll do it. Oh no, two more. Doing right by the community in its widest sense. Yes, to be able to benefit those communities based on what they need and what can support and help them. Not being afraid to be different, being bold, don't be cowed by criticism of the perception of co-ops being harder. Yeah, totally agree with that. Because I think people can think that it can be quite a complex, you know, side of a business or way of being able to manage your organization, but actually don't let that put you off, because there's loads of support and help out there as well, isn't there? Thank you. I'll stop now. Back to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Stacey. So I'm just going to come back onto my slides again. So just to bring us on to the final part of the webinar, thanks ever so much for taking part in all of those mentees. And hopefully, you know, you'll find some, you know, there'll have been some useful stuff in this webinar for everybody. I mean, obviously, it's a massive topic. And it is like an evolving area as well. I feel like, you know, having been putting together information and working in sort of cooperative leadership for a few years, it does feel like you know, it would be great to set up like a sort of a cooperative leadership network, or some sort of place where, or a forum or something where people can come together and kind of, you know, have that opportunity to kind of like chat through issues with different people working in the field of cooperatives, and people who are, you know, both members, workers, you know, directors, you know, volunteers, whatever in the cooperative movement, you know, and sharing that kind of expertise, like you know, how different ways in which people are kind of tackling things like, you know, low member participation rates, or, you know, those kind of different sort of aspects. And also, you know, some businesses working in a really, really fast-paced environment where, you know, you do need to make those kind of spur of the moment decisions about things in a, you know, in a rapidly evolving situation. You know, how can we kind of, you know, balance the governance needs of a co-op and the kind of business needs? So it's that kind of duality as well, isn't it? We're always in a cooperative, there's always that kind of, you know, that kind of careful balancing act between, you know, the business, the real kind of business focused side, and that kind of democratic governance side of things. So if you're a leader in all of that, you know, how do you navigate that kind of duality of a cooperative as well? So it's like, you know, a super interesting area to be kind of looking at and talking about. So just after our sort of final bit of information about the college and the kind of stuff that we're doing around leadership, we just wanted to kind of highlight you know, some of the work that we are evolving at the moment. We are in the process of working with the School of Business at the University of Dundee to develop master's level modules in cooperation. And you know, we're super excited about this. At the moment, we are running a pilot with climbs in the Philippines, or the cooperative movement in the Philippines. So we're working with the Cooperative College of the Philippines. So we have various different people from cooperatives who are taking part in our pilot. And so at the moment, we're piloting the leadership and management module, but we are also developing these other 3 modules. So the cooperative enterprise in a global context, which, you know, kind of talks about business in that kind of more global sense. It looks at how cooperatives have developed over time, but also, you know, what are the kind of the issues and, you know, different factors affecting cooperative business around the world today. But also looking at cooperatives and innovation and sustainability. So really looking at that cooperative difference and thinking about, you know, how are cooperatives evidencing that they are, you know, performing a role and a function in that space as well. And then the final one, the cooperative work-based report, is very much a kind of practical module where people taking part in it actually do a kind of case study of a cooperative across many of those different sort of topic areas. So looking, you know, it's a bit more of a kind of an extended piece of work around a particular aspect of cooperation. So we are working together at the college, but with a range of different experts as well. And we're also working in partnership with the University of Dundee School of Business. It's a very sort of flexible approach. So each module is over 10 weeks, but they can be done in succession, or they can be stacked up together, and you can start one, and then, you know, you have a number of years in which to complete the other modules. And if they're stacked, you can then have a PG cert in cooperative leadership. And so in terms of who these modules are for, it's for sort of leaders or people working in cooperatives. So, you know, building on knowledge, or, you know, coming to knowledge, to some new knowledge and finding out more about the cooperative movement in general, but also gaining a fresh perspective. And this is what we really enjoy, is these kind of collaborative and cooperative learning spaces that we create. So the modules are delivered in a very kind of interactive and kind of peer-to-peer kind of way, where we like to create spaces for people to share their knowledge and learn from each other as much as they're learning from the course as well. And so, you know, the ultimate aim is for people to strengthen their own cooperatives, to strengthen their knowledge, but also to kind of work together to build the cooperative movement overall. And I'm just going to hand over to Stacey as well to see if there's anything that she'd like to add.
I don't think I've got anything else to add to the master's level modules. And I suppose when we're thinking about who it's for, you know, if you've just got an interest in it, I suppose as well, you know, wanted to join because you were really passionate about the world of cooperatives, you know, it's open to people who want to come.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. So just to finish off, I've just realised that we're literally 2 minutes away from finish time. So we managed to time the session perfectly, which is always great. So just to say, you know, if you have any questions, obviously now we've only got 2 minutes. If you have any questions, then, you know, do feel free to kind of like quickly slip some questions into chat and we'll get back to you. But also, you know, if you look at the address on the screen, learning@coop.ac.uk, that is our mailbox. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, or, you know, any sort of further comments you'd like to make, or if you want to do any work with the college, then do please reach out to us, because we are always open to making, you know, new friends and new partnerships.